This is the NEU's fortnightly look at issues around COVID and schools. This fortnight, looking at the amount of time children in our country have had off compared with other European countries, what the government should do about investment, what the government should do about mitigations, something about what we might see in the future. This chart tells us that school days lost in the UK are higher than all other European countries other than Italy, which was hit so hard by the pandemic. Now, we think this is because our class sizes are so high, our classrooms are so crowded, and because our government has mishandled the pandemic. But we have to be aware that not only are we near that top of that international league table, which in the country as a whole, but children in schools with more free school meals have missed more education than children in more advantaged schools. This is not a surprise. If your parents are cleaners, security guards, care home workers, then they couldn't work from home. And when they returned from work, they returned to more densely packed housing, both of those contributing to higher COVID cases and children missing more education. On this basis, we really need investment for schools. The Prime Minister has now committed £5.4 billion a year to the NHS. But in February, he also said we've got to work flat out now as a country, as a society, to remedy the loss of learning that kids have had. So where's the evidence of that in commitment of money by this government? This chart from the Education Policy Institute shows how much less commitment there is by our government than the governments in the United States or the Netherlands. Far more money per pupil on education recovery. And I think we also have to be aware that at the moment, we do not know how much more education our children will miss. We do know that as schools open in September, cases amongst primary and secondary pupils are as high as they were last December. And we do know that in Scotland, very many children are absent from school. On Tuesday of this week, it was nearly 40,000 pupils off for COVID reasons. Now, actually, Scotland has a bit more mitigation than England. They still have mask wearing in secondary schools, for example. But if those levels of cases were replicated in England, after a couple of weeks, we would be at a place where there are 400,000 pupils off school. Now, there is just a hint of good news in the Scottish chart here that level seems to have stopped increasing, but we could still be at 400,000 children off school in England in a couple of weeks' time if we follow the Scottish pattern. That's why in the NEU we want more mitigations. We think that masks should have been kept until the trends are clear on this. We think the government should be using a lot more of its political capital to advocate for the use of lateral flow tests by secondary children and by parents of primary children. We think ventilation and HEPA filtration are very important in stopping the disease spreading in schools and thereby stopping children missing education. There are some other bits of safety. In-person staff meetings shouldn't be happening. CEV, pregnant women need individual risk assessments. When we look at the overall case level, this is before schools opened, so up to the 31st of August. We see the graph decline dramatically from January. After our big meeting on January the 4th, when we said that schools shouldn't open, and then the government brought in restrictions, cases fell. They actually carried on falling even after schools opened on the 8th of March. But then with the spread of Delta and the government's relaxations, then cases have gone up to a level that people think is uncomfortably high, a bit flat in the last weeks of August, but we have to see what the opening of schools now brings. We do know that in Scotland, with the relaxation that happened on the 12th of August, which was a bit like the July the 19th relaxation in England, and then the opening of schools the following week, that cases did go up sharply. Having said that, it's true and important that deaths are not going up dramatically. They are uncomfortably high at often 200 a day, but they aren't going up. We want government to have mitigations in place to keep cases down in schools wherever we can, which can help with hospitalizations. And the NEU continues to have lots of other resources on COVID, including our school COVID map. Please take a look at it. Thanks for being a member of the union. We can get through this pandemic together. Thanks very much.